We're talking Alabama because the Tide, they took care of business last weekend at home against LSU. But this weekend, Oklahoma comes to town, another big-time SEC matchup. And we're only 3 weeks until signing day, so we're going to have Andrew Bone on this video to break down what's going on with Alabama recruiting. But before we do that, Tide fans, do me a favor, hit subscribe. These are important times to be subscribed to the Rivals Recruits channel. All right, let's bring in Andrew Bone with Bama Online. Now, let's start with we're going to get into the big visit weekend and everything that Alabama has going on, but are there any Alabama commitments taking trips to other programs that fans need to be aware of down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen a few guys that have taken visits this year. Yeah, Nolan Wilson was the kid, the top 100 defensive lineman that visited Auburn a few weeks ago, and he was also at Miami earlier this season. But not really concerned with Nolan. He's been to most all of Alabama's home games this season, and it seems to be very solid with his commitment. I talked to one of his coaches who said that he was not concerned with Alabama's position, that he was just basically going to some of these games to see some of his old teammates play and support some of the recruits from their school. Bear Fretwell, spoke with him last night, offensive lineman from Georgia, previously committed to Georgia Tech, and was in Atlanta a couple weeks ago for Georgia Tech's game during Alabama's bye week. So kind of caught a lot of people off guard, not Alabama because he had informed Alabama beforehand, but I would say coming off of his official visit with Alabama the previous week, had said that things were shut down, but then ends up over at Georgia Tech. So I asked him about that, and he said, I was committed to Georgia Tech for a long time. They were the first school to believe in me. They had a great season this year. They've been asking me to come up just to watch them play one weekend, so I decided to go up there. I had a good time, but they know where I'm going. I know where I'm going, and that's Alabama. And he was in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. It's going to be at Alabama's next two home games against Oklahoma and again against Eastern Illinois next weekend. So not really concerned about Bear Fretwell either. Most of these other guys in Alabama's class have said that they're very solid. Things are shut down. I think the one player that we have seen take a recent visit that a lot of people have been questioning because he's been very quiet. He hadn't really talked a lot. Hadn't done any interviews throughout the season. That's J.J. Finch out of Indianapolis, who went over to Tennessee a few weekends ago. Kind of an unexpected trip. He had said he wasn't sure he was going to take any more visits, never really announced anything, but ends up going down to Knoxville. And Tennessee was number 2 on his list when he committed to Alabama during the summer. So that was one thing that we were really intrigued to kind of find out, was how involved was Tennessee still, how high were they still being considered by J.J. Finch. And he even came out after that visit and said that they were high, that he was still considering them. But from this past weekend, he was in Tuscaloosa for the LSU game. It was his first trip back to Tuscaloosa since June. There had been some talk about him going up to Ohio State this weekend for a visit because they had still been pushing to get him on campus. But doesn't seem like he's going to go over to Ohio State. Seems like he's very solid with Alabama still. I'm sure Tennessee's still going to try to push for him late in the process. But 3 weeks left. I feel Alabama's in a pretty good spot there. I think the one other guy that we're going to be paying attention to is Brian Williams. Been a commitment to Alabama since June. Was a spring offer for Alabama. Took a trip to Tuscaloosa for the Tennessee game, but it's been very quiet. I think he showed up at USF the other day. Alabama's got a couple other wide receiver commitments in its class, including 5-star Cedarian Morgan, Owen Cabell from Nashville, and they just hosted Michigan State wide receiver commit Samson Gash this past weekend for an official visit, and one of the fastest players in the country. And that's certainly somebody that they are pushing to get in their class, and somebody that we're certainly paying very close attention to right now. So would not be shocked if we saw Brian Williams end up going somewhere else, but as of right now, still on the Alabama commitment list.
You mentioned wide receiver Samson Gash on campus. He's Michigan State commitment. Kind of feel good about him, all the things he had to say. He had goosebumps when he was in the stadium. It sounds like it's only a matter of time until this flip happens. Any other flip targets with 3 weeks to go?
Yeah, not really. I think a lot of people are just waiting to hear who's going to be that other name that ends up popping up the last couple of days in the in the recruiting cycle. And this year, it doesn't seem like there's really anybody else that's out there. I think Alabama's pretty comfortable with its current class. They also know that they're going to have to go and get guys in the portal because they're going to have some big losses from their team this year. Guys that are seniors, guys that are going to be moving on in important positions. Whether that's on they're going to lose 3 senior linebackers. They're going to lose some guys on the defensive front. So offensive line. These are going to be some areas that I think Alabama is certainly going to be looking at. So they really can't go out and spend a lot more in the high school ranks right now. They're going to have to save some of that for the for the transfer portal period here coming up on January the 2nd. So I think Samson Gash is probably that last guy that we're really kind of following as far as guys that they want to try to flip and really bring into their class between now and the early signing period.
All right. So when it comes to visitors this weekend, the focus has to be on 2027. I mean, across the country, it's all about where are the top 2027 names heading. Who are some of the headliners you're expecting in Tuscaloosa this weekend? Inside Scoop listeners, let's talk Game Time because the NFL season is underway. College football rivalry season is here. And who doesn't love to see their favorite NFL or college team live and in person, especially when you can go with a group of your buddies. But tickets aren't always going to be easy to find, and getting deals on those last-minute tickets can be frustrating when all you want is to be there the moment your team runs out onto the field. Well, thankfully, the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing ticket experiences, and it only takes a few simple clicks. The app, it's easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means that you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. You can even get into an NFL game as low as $100. That's why I use the Game Time app. It's super simple, and it makes the experience of buying great seats a breeze. Also, one of the coolest features I've seen is the Game Time lowest price guarantee. So Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference to guarantee you're getting the lowest price if you can find cheaper tickets elsewhere. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code INSIDESCOOP. That's promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Yeah, so I would say last weekend was the weekend that really was beyond impressive, the amount of 5-star recruits that were on campus in the 27 class. I mean, it just seemed like a who's who among the best prospects in that.
Were you surprised that Kennedy Brown showed up?
A little bit, because he wasn't on the initial list. I mean, we saw right. Maxwell Hiller on campus, Ishmael Kamara. We saw Albert Simeon. These are 3, 5-star caliber guys that were all on campus in that 27 class. And then Kennedy Brown shows up kind of at the last minute. We didn't know he was coming until Friday. We'd confirmed all the other guys. So it was a really good offensive line front. They were all in Tuscaloosa. In addition to guys like Elijah Haven, DJ Jacobs, Zyron Forstall, Anthony Sweeney. I mean, it was absolutely loaded this past weekend. One guy that's coming in this week that was actually supposed to be in last weekend, who's another top elite offensive lineman, is Jake Hildebrand out of Arizona. He's a guy that Alabama offered several months ago. They've really pushed hard for him. Maxwell Hiller, basically as of right now has Alabama at the top of his list. I think Steve Wiltfong even put in a prediction for Hiller to Alabama. But one of the guys that we consistently heard about since back in the spring with Hiller's name is Jake Hildebrand, a guy that it seems really high on Alabama. I think he's been to Tuscaloosa a couple of times now, so this will be his third visit. So really intrigued to kind of see how his weekend goes in T-Town. One other guy that I'll mention, we'll have a complete list of all the visitors on BOL. Already have that up on on the roundtable on our premium message board. But one guy that I am really intrigued to see is Kellen Hall, the number one defensive lineman in the 28 class. So just a sophomore, still has a long way to go, but he's going to be making a trip to Alabama this weekend. He was actually supposed to be on campus last weekend, but ended up having to push it to this week out of the Louisville area. So that's a guy that I'm really intrigued to kind of see how his weekend goes, because obviously defensive lineman is a premium position. It's a position that I think Alabama fans, and I'm sure fans around the country, but especially Alabama fans on our message board, are constantly asking about who's going to be that next defensive line commit for Alabama. Who are they going after? Alabama has 5 defensive linemen in the 26th class right now, and they're still asking, who's out there, who's left out there on the defensive front. So still a few years away, but Kellen Hall, definitely a big name that's going to be on campus this weekend.
All right, Bama fans, another big recruiting weekend in Tuscaloosa. How you guys feeling about the season? How you feeling about recruiting? And who do you think is going to be the next defensive line commitment? Let us know. Comment section below.